Thanks for joining us on Over My Dead Poddy, the podcast hosted by Nichola Reader and Carl Tate that aims to bust those myths about all things funerals and answer the questions you never dared ask. So stick in your earbuds, listen, and then send us your questions for the things we still haven't answered for you. Happy listening. Well, welcome back, and here we go with Series 2, Episode 10 of Over My Dead Poddy. Carl, welcome back. How are you doing?
Great, yeah, no, it's fantastic to be here. Wow, as if we are here at Episode 10. What a ride.
It's been great, hasn't it? It's sort of crept up on us, this season finale, with almost 1,000 Facebook followers, touching 3,000 downloads. It seems a long time ago since we were first starting to talk about the show.
It does. I mean, when you think back to when we first had the idea, I genuinely remember us standing outside Darlington Crematorium and having this chat of, what do you think of this, Carl? I think, I think we might be onto something there. Let's give it a go. And here we are.
And here we are, 20 episodes down in total. And this will be the end of Season 2. We're going to take a little break after this, give ourselves time to regroup, to get in touch with some new speakers who we want to appear on the show. And just so you know, that producer Steve is going to have a little bit of follow-up treatment following on from some things that they found when he was having his appendix out last year, that was. So we all wish producer Steve well, and we'll all be back for Series 3 within a few weeks or so. We'll let you know from socials when we're back again. So how do we finish Series 2? What do you think for this episode, Carl?
Well, I know that we've always spoke about the listeners getting in touch with us, and I know that we've had a couple of questions come in, and I think that's only right that we answer them. Obviously, people want to know these questions. That's what we're here for. So why not do it there and just... I mean, if there's anything you want to get off your chest, of course, by all means. I'm quite chilled out at this present moment in time, so I'm all right. So yeah, unless you want to fire into something, but I'm sure that might just crop up as we go through these questions.
We might get a bit ranty as we go on. So perfect. We're going to do an episode on quick fire funeral cues. These are genuine questions that have come in off the back of episodes from this season. But I'd like to introduce a new element to today's show as well. And this is something for you listeners to get involved in. And this is called 100% Bingo. Now, you may have noticed that my lovely esteemed co-host, Carl, does like the phrase 100% quite a lot.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I give, 100%.
Bingo!
100% bingo.
There we go with the first one. So, dear listeners, have a guess now for how many times you think our lovely Carl is going to say the phrase 100% in the next 30 minutes. And if you get close to it, let us know, and there might be a prize for whoever's closest. Is that all right with you, Carl?
That sounds good to me, yeah. No, that's fine.
That has been another bit of feedback we've chuckled about this season, that we've had from people. So on with the questions we go. So we're going to start with a bit of a funny one that's come in from somebody who I think is trying to be a little bit sneaky. And it goes right back to the first episode where you were ranting about the wait time on registering deaths. And the question is, do you have to register a death in your hometown, or could you do it somewhere else if it's going to get you a quicker funeral date?
Okay, so with registering a death, the death has to be registered in the county that the person dies in. Now, that's a given. That's how it works. So, but if you live, let's say, for example, in Richmond, and you die in Richmond, and you live Richmond in Surrey, that's where you live, but your mum died in Richmond, North Yorkshire. You can register by declaration, which is where the registrar sends all of the paperwork from Richmond in North Yorkshire down to the registrar in Surrey. You can register there by declaration, declaring everything there, and it's then sent back to the registrars here. But it doesn't make things any quicker.
Yeah, that's got to slow things down.
It goes the opposite way.
Yeah.
And certainly the way the registration is at the moment, you just have to sit and wait. So it doesn't make anything quicker. So, thanks for that question. Just to wind me up straight off the bat.
Yeah. So please just go to your nearest registry office and register, because that will be the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So leading on from that then, do you have to use your local crematorium, or can you choose where you go?
Well, you genuinely can go wherever you wish. So I've been very privileged to look after families who've lived up here in the Yorkshire Dales, but originally came from places like Canterbury, certain places in Wales. And what we've done is we've arranged things as funeral directors here, but then we've travelled down to that particular, so we did a funeral service down in Canterbury. We went to a church and a burial, and it was everything ran as I would have put it and arranged it. But we just moved everything down to a local funeral directors in Canterbury.
And I've done the opposite of that, where the family were all living up in the Lake District. That's where the deceased had grown up, but he was living in London. So the deceased was moved up here, and we had his funeral over in the Lake District. But the family just knew me from having done other services and wanted me to conduct it. Deliver it, hence why I was involved with the Lake District one. But you can kind of make it work wherever we need to make it work for you.
Yes, and I think in busier times as well, where we've had certain wait times at crematoriums, if families want, maybe once we've gone past the registration and they want a quicker service, you know, a lot of the times the funeral directors can accommodate other times. It's down to the crematorium, so we can then suggest other local crematoriums that potentially might be able to offer times that other crematoriums can't. So again, it's in your funeral director's sort of in your funeral director's interest to help you out and make sure that you get the service you want on the date and time that you ultimately want as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there are some crematoriums in the northeast area, so I'm thinking kind of Teesside and Stockton, where there are two chapels, and therefore they've got twice as many services that they can deliver across the course of a day than, say, Darlington or Maple Park or Weir Valley. And that's just about kind of facilities that are available. But there are a lot of pieces to put together in the jigsaw. So we're going to come on to a bit of a controversial one, because a scenario I heard of recently, not me, it was one of my colleagues who talked to me about this, and it's kind of, how do we put all of those pieces together? How pushy can I be to get the efficient and the date I want? So my colleague was notified by a family who said, oh, we're really sorry you couldn't do our dad's service. And my colleague said, I didn't know anything about it, what do you mean? And it was a funeral director that they didn't usually work with, and that funeral director, although the request from the family had been that they choose a specific celebrant, that funeral director had never asked the celebrant and went back to the family and said, oh yeah, sorry, they're not available, so we're going to go with this person.
Oh dear.
But obviously they found out because the celebrant was then at the funeral, and it's like, oh, I thought you weren't available to do this for us. And it's kind of, how do you, that does not happen a lot at all. All of the funeral directors I work with will go out of their way to get you the celebrant you want. But there are so many pieces of the jigsaw: a date at the crematorium, cars available, funeral director available, registration happening. How pushy can a family be in getting what they want?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the families can request, I mean, obviously we can request anything you like, and that's the funeral director's job, is to accommodate everything as best they can. And if they can't come with that specific date and time, then they work around the best solution to the nearest date, or this is how we do it. And certainly if there is a request for a celebrant, or, you know, it's a little bit different for churches, but certainly for independent celebrants, right, then okay, so instead of booking the crematorium first, you ring the minister and say, right, Nichola, this is what we're looking at, what can you do? And then we get a list of dates and times from you, as we would the church, and that's how it works.
Yeah. And I think the moral of that is that you just need to work out in your mind what your priority is. So if the priority is there's somebody we definitely want to do this service, an officiant, a minister, a celebrant, you can ring that person before you speak to your funeral director. So while we work with funeral directors, we don't work for them, and there's absolutely nothing stopping you contacting us first. So you can call us and have that conversation and say, I'd really like you to take it. Can you give me some dates for your availability? Or can I just give your name to the funeral director and can you hook up with them? And we'll always be very happy to do that. If the officiant's your priority. If a particular date is your priority, and perhaps your efficiency's second priority, then let your funeral director know. In that big jigsaw, it really helps to know what's most important to you, because for everybody it will be different. It might be a date, it might be a time, it might be a location, it might be the celebrant.
I mean, there's a fine line, when you're saying, being pushy, and I wouldn't say it's pushy, I just think it's being specific. And if that's what a family want, then that's fine. But also what you have to realise is it's not just getting that minister, as you just said. So we've got to tie in the crematorium. We have to look at the funerals that we're already committed to, that families have already had booked in weeks before. Yeah. So they're all booked in, the cars, the teams that we have, the bearers. Then you look onto time frames. So what is it, time specific? Can we get this done properly? The minister's great, they're in, we're free, the crematorium's free. And then all of a sudden the family will say, oh, well, the venue's not free where we want to go for our refreshments. Yeah. And that then literally stops the whole running order. And you think, right, well, what do you want to do? So then we come back with, well, this is what that again is the funeral director's job, to work with the family, and it is a bit of give and take every now and again. But the majority of the time, I would say, you definitely, absolutely, you fulfil what the family want, because that's the role of that's the role of a funeral director.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think from a celebrant perspective, just be clear in knowing what you want, and don't be afraid to ask for it. I think sometimes there's this fear that funeral directors or anybody involved in the funeral industry are kind of this authoritative, very strict figure who you just have to do what they say, and it's just not the case anymore. It really isn't. We are absolutely wanting to deliver the service that you need for your loved one and for you to move forward, and it just isn't that anymore, where you can't say no, or you can't ask for what you want.
And that's something I've never ever said no to a family, and I think I've maybe repeated this before on a previous podcast, is that I've never said no to a family, but I said, look, I'll come back and I'll let you know. Can we do this? Yes. No. I'd never say that, but we can look at another alternative. And that's also when I've been looking after trainee funeral directors. It's like, this is what I've been teaching. You never say no. You just say, look, I'll get back to you and we'll work around things. Because that's the way I've always worked.
And talking about flexibility, we've had a couple of scenarios recently where people have got in touch with me and said, I'm just not sure if I'm doing the right thing having a celebrant service, because I don't know if mum might have wanted a few prayers, might have wanted that religious committal. I'm just not sure. When does it cross the line? When does a celebrant service become a faith-led service? And I'm very clear about kind of more than 2 hymns and a prayer. And I'm starting to think you really need a vicar. It's not me. That doesn't mean I can't write your eulogy and deliver your eulogy, or I can't be part of the process. But more than a couple of hymns and a prayer, and for me, it's like we're slipping into me misleading people. This is a faith-led service. What are your thoughts on the line between them?
Well, again, so this is just my own personal opinion. I see it a little bit more clear, a bit more as in black and white. Is you're either a celebrant, or you're a churchgoer, or you're a religious faith. I'm technically Catholic, not practicing. Let's have that right. But for me, I would never interfere with families' wants and beliefs. So again, I've arranged hundreds of funerals where we've had independent celebrants like yourself. I've listened to them. I've been involved with them with you, Nichola, where we've had a couple of hymns, we've had the Lord's Prayer, and again, it's just not for me. I wouldn't be doing it, but if that's what families want, then that's fine. There is no line for me in that respect, because I sit on the fence as a funeral director and listen to what the family wants. So that's perfectly fine. Yeah. And I've listened to many, many services from yourself to other celebrants who I know, trust and love to bits, and I know that they deliver exactly what that family wants. And if that's what they want, then I'm fine with that. Who am I to preach to anybody? But for me, I would, if we're saying the Lord's Prayer, again, it's a grey area, isn't it? Yeah. Who am I to judge or say? But hymns, prayers, particular Bible readings, well, that for me, then we're into the church territory, and they'll say, "Oh well, yes, yeah, Mum used to go to Sunday school, but she hasn't done in years." Well, of course she's not going to done years. She's 98. She's not going to go to a Sunday school. She won't have gone to church for many years because potentially she's not been able to. And then it's because a lot of families have attended non-religious services, that's where the swing's going towards. And there are more and more non-religious services popping up everywhere. Again, that's perfectly fine. That's what families want. But I think that line is in my opinion.
Yeah. And it is really difficult, and my view isn't on my belief, because my belief is absolutely irrelevant to the conversation. It's about me not misleading anybody into thinking that they are at a service delivered by somebody with religious or faith authority, and that the deceased is being taken into God's care in any way, because I can't promise or deliver that. I'm not authorised to. I have no credibility to do that. And that's the bit where I've had families say, "Well, could you just slip into the committal that, we're committing your body to God's care?" And it's like, I don't have the authority for that. I can't.
I think the other thing as well for me is that families say, "Oh, what do you think?" I think, well,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter what I think, or when they're choosing coffins, what do you think of this? So my role is to get to know the families, look after them, but just give you every single option that's available. And if that means, arrangements nowadays do take quite a while, because you've got to go into each and every part of the funeral in great depth to make sure that you've not missed anything, and that families certainly aren't misled in any way. Because what I would hate to happen is that if I was to arrange you to go to family, Nichola, and they were expecting someone to turn up in a dog collar, and then all hell breaks loose, and what I might...
Well, I might do, but it might not be a religious
one. Exactly. You tell me what you like. But you know what I mean? And that's, I think that's, it's the part of the role is to make sure that you understand your families.
Yeah, completely. And sometimes a family will say to me, it's not really about what Mum believed or Dad believed, but it is about, there will be people in the congregation who would feel more comfortable if they had chance to say a prayer. And sometimes actually funerals are for the living as well. So without misleading anybody, if we can create that opportunity where somebody can say a prayer, or a moment of silence where they can say a prayer in their own minds, then that's about giving people what they need to move forward as well.
Yeah, I would agree there, because
would you agree 100%?
I would agree 100%. Yeah, I was going to say 100%. It's in the back of my mind. 100%. I would agree there. Genuinely, I would. And when the non-religious services sort of kicked off, there was a big, explosion of them, and families were loving them. They thought this is great, and it was. But then there was also the point that we did have the congregation saying, "Oh, it would have been nice to have a little bit of time to say a prayer," as you said, say my own private prayers. And I think that's when we then started coming into the music for reflection sort of era, where we'd have that music, people could say a silent prayer. Then it's moved on from the music to now photo tributes, and it's an ever evolving beast, really, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of a steer on what might be possible within religious, non-religious, some of the guidelines that we perhaps have to work to. So having had a touch of humour in those questions we were answering, thank you so much to all of you who sent them in. We are now just going to touch on a more serious and sensitive subject, following on from Bex's amazing episode about baby loss, because we did have a couple of questions that came in from that. So we just wanted to give you the trigger warning that for the next 5-10 minutes or so, we are going to be talking about baby and child loss. So if you want to just fast forward, skip this bit, if you feel it's too difficult for you to listen to, then by all means do. And there'll just be a little bit at the end where we're going to be talking about choreography of funerals. So we'll leave you just to duck out for a moment. One thing that came in from our listeners is, are children's funerals free? There seems to be quite a lot of confusion about what we mean by free, what bits are free, is everything free? So do you want to answer, Carl, on behalf of the funeral director element?
Yes, I think I should. It's always a very difficult one with children's funerals. Obviously, all funerals are very upsetting, but the children obviously they are a lot more tougher to deal with as such. So with regards to funeral directors themselves, so each funeral director has their own individual policies and ideas on what basically a funeral for a child is. And I would always suggest going to speak to your funeral director and just talking to them about things, what's free and what isn't. So let's think firstly about things like coffins. So coffins, again, some funeral directors offer very simple, traditional sort of either white, or these can be sprayed. So you'd have white, blue, or pink. Sometimes are free, sometimes are not. There is a funeral fund available from the government that gives you a certain amount of money towards these costs, such as the coffin and even maybe a little bit towards the flowers as well. But usually the funeral director fees are waived, and then coffins and flowers are paid for by the family. When you look at other fees that are involved in funeral services, so cremations or burials. So again, looking at usually the cremations, the crematoriums waiver their fees, so they're free. And also, 9 times out of 10, I'd like to say, the burial charges are free. Now, when I say burial charges, I mean the plots of land. But you also have to pay somebody to dig and dress that grave. Somebody has to do it, so they, of course, again, it's up to the individual, and it's the same for clergy. Obviously, we'll move over to you in a moment, but a lot of the churches waiver their fees. However, the vicar will still get paid for that job because he's technically working. However, the church don't technically charge you. Ministers, that's another one. So again, ministers take fees because that's their job. They're getting paid for a role to do, and unfortunately it varies between ministers and celebrants, and it's up to them personally. But I would always suggest that there is a fee for a minister or celebrant like yourself, Nichola.
Thank you.
There we
I
are.
appreciate that. And exactly as you said, Carl, at the beginning of that answer, children and baby services are some of the toughest that we'll ever deal with for lots and lots of reasons. And back when I started this role in 2020, very much it was assumed that celebrants wouldn't charge for children's funerals, for anybody under the age of 16, in some cases 18. And that was because the church didn't. And there's always been a belief that celebrants should be on kind of an even fee footing to the church, because people shouldn't pay more for a non-religious. So I understand that. But a vicar still gets paid whether the church charges for that service or not. And as freelancers, celebrants don't. But it isn't about the money at all. I do charge now for children's services, and a lot of the FDs I work with are very comfortable with that position. And there's a number of reasons for that. So, if you have somebody who is 1 week below their 16th birthday and 1 week past their 16th birthday, why does one get it free and one not? They're not likely to have any more money in the bank as an individual than each other. And you might get somebody who's 1 week shy of their 16th coming from a very affluent family who can well afford a funeral, and somebody who's 1 week after their 16th birthday who has less money and can't afford it. And why should it be the case that one gets it free and one doesn't? So it just didn't feel a very fair rule to me. And equally, I've then also heard of a scenario, not up here in the north, it was down in the south, where a 6-year-old child died very suddenly. Family crowdfunded, quite rightly, as is their right to do, for a funeral, raised tens of thousands of pounds for that child's funeral, and the funeral director still expected the celebrant to do the service for free. And in that scenario, out of tens of thousands of pounds, £240 is not a lot of that. But what did that money go towards if it wasn't for paying for the funeral? So there just felt like a few discrepancies that didn't make sense to me.
I get all of that, and it is a difficult subject to broach. But at the end of the day, my view, and again, everybody's views are different, so this is just genuinely my view, is that the service that you provide, Nichola, obviously I know we've done lots of services together, in my opinion, the service that you do for a 60-year-old, an 80-year-old, 20-year-old, 5-year-old, 4-year-old, you name it, all deserve the same amount of effort, time, of yours to put into a service, regardless of what's going into it, what's going to be said. You still have to craft that service. It still has to be bespoke to that individual family need. And that time of yours is precious. And of course, yes, this is your job, and for me, I wouldn't expect anybody to do it free. If they do, then that's fine. But of course, unfortunately, that's just the way of the world is,
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, as celebrants, it isn't about the money. That's not why we do this job, although we are business people, but the money isn't everything at all. What I do say to all my funeral directors is just talk to us, and I will always do a complimentary service, one each for each of my funeral directors. Use it at your discretion when you feel you need it during the year. So, for example, I had a homeless veteran in Catterick who sadly passed away. The Royal British Legion were going to pay for their service for my fee, and it just felt to me like the RBL was better off keeping that money than giving it to me. So on that occasion, it's like, do you know what, let's just wipe my fee. The funeral director knew he could call on that kind of discretionary fund. And we will always find a way. If you came to me and said, I've got a family that really, they've only got £100 to put towards an official, what can you do? Of course there's something. Everyone deserves a respectful farewell, and there's always a way around these things. So it's, let's just have the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And it's the same with funeral directors. Again, you wouldn't look at having a very small coffin placed in the back of a giant hearse. It just doesn't look right. It isn't right. So what you would then do is we would change the hearse for a limousine, and the family can all get into the car.
Yeah.
Baby can sit on mum or dad's lap or whoever, and then that just replaces things. So there are ways and means around things, and that's, again, it's opening up the conversations. And I know that we had an amazing podcast with Bex, and rightly so, she went through everything, which was amazing. But obviously this side of things is just informing you on what happens and why and what to expect, because that's the other part of it as well.
And on that point, Carl, one of the other questions we had in, which this is a really difficult listen, so we will give you that spoiler alert. But at what point in a pregnancy that isn't proceedable are you able to have a funeral? So from the moment that you know you're pregnant, at maybe 4 or 5 weeks, if you were to lose your baby a week later, could you still have a funeral for that baby?
The chances are very, very, very slim, and I will make that point very clear. Obviously, when the pregnancy is no more and there's no heartbeat or anything, or you lose that baby, it depends on what stage you're at, as we've mentioned. And I know that we spoke earlier about sort of up to 20 weeks, but again, it all goes on things like what is actually there. What are we? Is there a cremation to have? Is there anything physical to cremate? And unfortunately, sometimes there isn't, and we lose these precious ones. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't have some form of celebration or some form of memory service or dedication or anything like that to that child, because let's be fair, if that's what the family wants, then that's what you can certainly have. It's not just a case of, all right, that's it, forget about it. If a family really want to go down that line of marking that occasion as such, then of course we can do.
So I think we've got to look at it in terms of the minute you're pregnant, there is a life. There is your child's life, and that's something to celebrate. The excitement, the anticipation, the hopes you have for them, the dreams you have as a family, and those are all things that you might want to acknowledge as part of the process of your child's life. And speak to your funeral director, who will be able to advise you in terms of where you were in your pregnancy, and kind of what the circumstances are for you and your baby as to what's possible in terms of a funeral or a memorial service. But there's absolutely every opportunity, even if you aren't able to have a cremation and a funeral, to get together somewhere that's special to you guys. It might just be in your front room and just say a few words, talk about your hopes and dreams, remember them, promise you'll never forget them, play some music, think about your little one. And you can do that. You don't have to have the formality of a funeral for that. So,
and I think as a funeral director, you really look at the practicalities of everything. So, obviously, if there is some form of the baby there, then of course you can look at having, whether we look at a burial or a cremation. And that's another thing that you have to be very mindful of, is that with cremations, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners will know that, when you get the ashes back, it's bone structure. That's what the ash is, it's bone. There's no coffin or anything like that. It genuinely is the bone structure. Now, if you don't have that, and you're then cremating a coffin, then potentially there may not be any ashes there at all. So once that cremation has taken place, there's no coming back from there. So that's another thing to be mindful of, is looking at, because inevitably some families start the pregnancy off with buying gifts and teddies and so on. So if there is the physical form of the baby there, we can place into a coffin together with the teddies and blankets and so on, and we can have a little service, whether it's a burial or a cremation. But again, that's something to be mindful of, is the mental aspects of the burial or cremation side. So again, it's just talking to the funeral director. And you've also, the other thing to mention is the midwives as well. So the hospital teams, they are incredible at what they do. They'll sort of set you off, guide you through it, and then that's when the funeral director would come in. So,
Carl, that is the end of the questions we're going to answer for now. We have a lot more, and we might come back to those in series 3, but they were just some of the ones that made me smile, that came in on the socials from these episodes. But I wondered if we could just revisit something that we've talked about in previous 100%. Episodes.
Let's get in. Let's go back.
That is sort of driven me mad the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
And this is about choreography and seating at funerals. So I had a situation in a crematorium a couple of weeks ago where I was very assertively told that not going into the crematorium hall before the deceased was bad form, not what they expected, and kind of a little bit who did I think I was to tell them they couldn't go and take their seats. And I sort of just reassured that member of the congregation very calmly that we will always ask the family what their preferred choreography is, whether they would like to go in ahead of their congregation and everybody follow them in, or if they'd like everybody to be seated. And I think sometimes families don't necessarily understand that when you come into a funeral, you very much expect things to happen. And when it's different, I feel like people are questioning. I just wanted to get your perspective, Carl, on choreography and this whole kind of what is the right thing to do, families leading in, the congregation being seated, how much choice do people have about that?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different variations and scenarios that you could put together and put to a family. Now, it's bizarre that if you think about a church service, the congregation goes in, takes the seats, and then the family come in last. Whereas at the crematorium, there isn't really a right or wrong to it. It is whatever the family would like. Now, the gentleman that you're referring to about coming up, was it a gentleman? Who knows?
It was a gentleman.
Oh, so we can say that, I suppose. But didn't really have any right to do or say what he did. There are on other occasions, of course, which I'm sure you know, where if it's an elderly couple or as someone who really needs to come in and sit down, of course you just let them in and sit down and say, do what you need to do. However, there are certain, scenarios that families have said, we want nobody inside that chapel at all until we get there. And then we want to be first in, seated, then the congregation seated, and then the coffin to be carried in. So the coffin is the very last thing that goes. Whereas some families say, no, they want the coffin led in by somebody like yourself, and then a funeral director. And what I always say to families is that the seating plans we can do roughly to a degree. So the front couple of pews for families, but individual seats of where people are sitting is very difficult to get right. However, what I do say to families is that once they do go in and they're seated or they're stood where they think they're going to be seated, they can just move. You know, it's not that's it. You're free to move. You can move around and have a little bit of a chat.
No, you can't.
Well, to a degree, in my eyes, you can. Like on the front row, it's your family. It's just the family.
Okay.
That's certainly just families. But then you've got things like if you're going to have a choir singing, the choir will all be grouped together in a certain section of the crematorium of the church so that they all get up at the same time. They're not sort of higgledy-piggledy here, there and everywhere, and that then causes problems. But the one, I think we both agree on this, that one of the big bugbears is that there's nobody wants to come and sit close to the family. They just sit anywhere. And that, for me, is a real tough one, because you're telling families that you're telling the congregation, come in and sit down, there's plenty of seats, we need to get everybody in, and people still don't come forward, and there's other problems that come with that, Nichola, isn't there?
Oh my gosh, so this is where I might get a little bit Miss Ranty Pants, for which I apologise, but it is, for a number of reasons, quite frustrating, the faffing on that happens of people coming in and getting seated at funerals. So if the family have come in first and taken their seats, all they want to do is get on with that service. They are so emotional, so anxious, they just want to get on with it as soon as we possibly can. And if we have people moving seats, wandering around, taking ages to choose where they're going to sit, it's just adding to their stress levels all the time when you can see them thinking, I just want to get on with this. So that's one issue we've got. Another issue is about time, and I know we've talked about this a lot, and it does always seem really brutal that a lot of our thoughts come back to what time do we have in that crematorium. But in the crematoriums where we have 20 minutes for a service, we've got a 5-minute allowance to get everybody in. If you take 10 minutes because everyone's been faffing about with where they're going to sit, you've already taken 5 minutes off your service time, and I'm having to race through to get it finished. So that's a bit of an issue. We also, if we're not expecting a huge congregation, we will have put order of service sheets out on one side of the chapel. And that's for a number of reasons. It's much more efficient in and out. Also, it's much easier for an officiant to be able to catch the eye, deliver to that group of people, rather than having to look all around the crematorium to try and get some eye contact and deliver to you. So where we put order of service sheets, that is where we want you to sit for various reasons. And there's nothing more frustrating than seeing somebody go in to sit down and then get up again to go and get an order of service sheet and go sit back down where they originally were. Just sit where there's an order of service sheet, because for reasons that you don't really need to know, that's kind of where we want you to sit. And then the other thing, my final rant, is this kind of, not filling up from the front. So we have the family in a big gap, and the family feel kind of quite lonely. They want to be surrounded by their loved ones. They want to feel like people are there to support them. And when they turn around and there's a big gap, that can feel a bit odd. And then we get people on a row of 7 sitting on the 2 seats in the middle. And people have to come past them or go around them. So it's just fill up every seat from the front as quickly as you possibly can. We have taken care of the family. Everybody who needs a special place to sit will have it, because we've had that conversation. We've seated the family. Believe me, the family do not care one iota where everybody else sits. They just want to get on with the service. Sorry, I feel very preachy and ranty. Apologies, listeners.
Enjoyed that. I just sat back. But I genuinely agree with you on all of the points. It is almost like the choreography of getting people in and out is sometimes a bit of a nightmare and a worry, an added worry for funeral directors, because we're working to tight time limits, as you said, and it just helps if you just walk in, just go in and just go and sit down. Everybody genuinely in the room is there for that person beside, so we're all in it together. And I understand that some people don't take kindly to sitting with people, really just want to sit on their own, and I suppose, that's fine as well. But ultimately, if you could sit somewhere near the group, that would help.
Yeah. And it does sound like I don't have empathy for people. I absolutely do. I know you're grieving. I know it's a difficult situation. And everybody feels like they're imposing on the family, or, sitting at the back. It's like, I don't want to appear that I'm overstating my importance in that person's life, or I'm kind of intruding on somebody else's grief. And I absolutely get that. It's a very British approach.
It is. And the one thing certainly to mention is that the crematoriums only, really, obviously the churches people can sit anywhere, but at crematoriums, as you said, the people who are going in first or have reserved seatings have their seats. So any other seat is up for grabs. Now, if that is on usually, historically, traditionally, on the left-hand side is where family members would sit, and you'd fill back up the pews there and the seats. So inevitably on the right-hand side is going to be empty seats on the front row. Now, the front two rows, certainly at Darlington, and I know up at Weir Valley, are lovely, comfy sofas. Now, why anybody would rather stand up for half an hour is to sit on one of these nice, comfy sofas, just to sit and have that moment to remember their friend or part of the family. I just think sometimes it is a bit balmier. It's definitely a very British thing.
It's a very British thing.
Yeah.
And also something people maybe don't realise is if you choose to stand up rather than to sit down when there are seats, it's difficult for us as officiants because we do get, on a reasonably regular basis, people fainting at funerals, and it's usually the people who are standing up. And if we start to see you twitch a little bit just because you've got a bit stiff and you need to have a bit of a move, my head is automatically thinking, oh, have we got a fainter? Because I'm the only one that can see that from the front. And I'm thinking, do I need to pause? Do we need to play some music while we sort this out? Does that guy need a chair? So you're automatically distracted by movement, thinking, have we got a medical emergency I need to deal with? So if there are seats, please take them. Please don't stand up. Particularly somewhere like Hartlepool, where you're standing up is the emergency exit. So, you block, if there are seats, you're blocking an emergency exit. And then if you are going to stand up, just come to the front as far down as you can. When I'm saying, get down here, in 25 years in event management, I am used to herding cats. So if you've been at one of my services and you hear me going, move down as far as you can, I'm sorry if I've seemed a little bit assertive, but I am just trying to get us all in, all as comfortable as we can be, started on time, minimise anxiety for the family.
Yeah, I get that.
Is that all right?
Perfect. Yeah, great. Right. Well done.
Rant over. The other thing I was just going to mention in terms of choreography is that we are starting to see more and more, actually, families asking for a private moment with their loved one at the end of a service. And it's really beautiful. So historically, families would always have led out first, certainly from a crematorium. Is that right? In a church?
Yeah.
And families are saying, actually, could everybody else leave the crematorium and could we just have that final moment just to gather around the coffin, the casket, maybe just to have, a moment as a family and to watch the curtains close in privacy, if that's what you want to do. And they are beautiful, beautiful moments, and we can facilitate those, no problem at all. The only thing I would say is just remember you need 5 minutes of your service time to do that. So if you've got a 20-minute service, allocate 5 minutes of that for that process to happen.
Yeah,
because that's what it takes.
100%, I agree. I mean, the thing is with when people come out of chapels and they walk past the family who are, the grieving relatives and the family who are there, they always stop and say, oh, I'll see you outside. It's like, we know we're going to see you outside. You just keep the flow going, get everybody out so that family can have their private moments. And it is becoming more and more of a part of the service. And rightly so. You can do anything you want as long as we all know about it, and it's not sort of a decision that's made literally as we're walking into the crematorium. Of course, we'll do it, but it does add a little bit of time onto things, and it does sort of create a little problem. But again, we work around it. Yeah,
and as long as we don't create that greeting line inside that we would normally have outside. So if you're going to do that, there isn't the time to stop and say hello to everybody on their way out. They have to leave. That has to happen quickly. So just to finish on that, so 2 things. One, if anybody would like to send T-shirts printed with Philip from the front or a sandwich board to Seat Leg in Darlington, Carl and I will very proudly wear those at a service. So Philip from the front and fill every seat. And the other thing is, just in terms of that choreography, it might not always be what you expect when you get to a crematorium, but it will always be what the family have requested, because that's the conversation and the responsibility that both Carl and I, any funeral director, any celebrant, will take really, really seriously. So please don't worry if things aren't happening like you thought they were going to. There's a reason for it. and we've agreed that with the family. So just be comfortable that the family are getting what they want.
That's it on the button.
100%.
100%.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for letting me have my little rant about that. And with that, we kind of draw to a close on series 2. What an amazing series it has been. We have had episodes from Katie Costello, the soul midwife. We had Dead Good Legacies talking about death education. We had the brilliant David Knowles, who was talking about life as a funeral director. We had Simon from Dignity talking about life managing crematoriums. We had Danielle, who was talking to us about wills and probate. Gosh, who else have we had? We had Bex talking about baby loss, of course. We had Hayley and Claire, who were talking about the options for palliative care. I don't think I've missed anyone there, but did you have a favourite moment from this series?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to pinpoint one specific, as I know, I'm really thankful to all of the guests that have come on because they're absolutely incredible. One thing that I enjoyed was actually having David Knowles on. So David's a personal friend as well, but it's always nice to get or hear the other opinions of a funeral director, and you gauge levels of where you are, because obviously he's very well respected in where he is, and I'd like to think I'm the same. And it's nice that you compare and you're about the same level. And it's always he's been doing it a lot longer than I have, and his insight sometimes it helps your own knowledge. And again, you could say that about all of the guests really, but certainly David coming on and going through his experiences and where the future lies really with funerals. What about yourself? Do you have any highlights? Yeah,
I think probably in the same vein, really, to a certain degree, that Katie Costello early on, soul midwife, but also celebrant, and the guys from Dead Good Legacies, death education, but also celebrant. So just as you said, it's great to hear what they're doing. And how I might do things differently, things I can learn from them and their journey. So that's great. But I've learned something from every single guest we've spoken to. Simon, Danielle, Bex, Hayley and Claire, they've all been brilliant and we've learned something. So thank you so much, you guys. We couldn't have made this series without you. And we're really honoured to have you as part of the show. So as we get ready for series 3, do get in touch with us if you would like to be part of the podcast, whether you're a funeral director, a funeral operative, working at any part of the industry whatsoever, then please do get in touch with us and we would love to have you on the show. So Carl, what's next on the agenda for you?
Well, I think for us as a podcast, we've also been invited to a few little different bits here and there.
We have.
And I'd also like to set up one of our own little workshops as such, obviously with the Grief Awareness Week and all that sort of everything that sort of goes with funerals. So keep an eye out for all that coming through as well.
Yeah, so over my Dead Poddy Live, that's some of the things that we're going to start working on in terms of how do we have some drop-in sessions that people can come and chat to us about, so you're not just listening. Maybe do a little bit of death education, maybe get into some schools and talk about grief and grieving for children and those kind of things. And also we have some ideas about downloadable expression of wish documents. So something you could grab off our website and very quickly just put in your thoughts about, cremation versus burial, music that you might like, religious, non-religious, those kind of things, so that it's at least a start of the roadmap to planning your end-of-life care and your funeral. So watch out for all of those things. We've got a busy few weeks ahead.
Exciting times.
Exciting times. But thank you more than anything to you guys, our incredible listeners. We love hearing your feedback. We love seeing your clicks, shares and likes. So please do, wherever you download our podcast, please do send some links on to anybody who you think might benefit from listening to the show. Let us know what more you want to hear from us. Look after yourselves, look after each other, and we will be back for series 3 very, very shortly.
Thanks, guys. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. 100%.
100%. I like that.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Thank you for listening, and we really hope you enjoyed and were inspired by this week's episode. Remember that you can get in touch with us anytime to ask a question, offer to be a guest, or to request that we bust a particular myth. You can get in touch via any of our social accounts over My Dead Poddy on Facebook, Insta, or TikTok. Or you can drop us an email at overmydeadpoddy@gmail.com. Just a reminder that whilst all of us work in the funeral industry, none of us are fully qualified grief counsellors. And therefore, if you've been affected by any of the issues that we've discussed today, we highly recommend that you seek out professional or medical support to help you with those conversations. Should you need any support, please do get in touch and we can hopefully signpost you in the right direction, but we can't offer those services ourselves. Thanks for listening, and we can't wait to bring you the next episode.